Eh, world stand up. Stretch out your hands. 1-8 represent the dream. Feeling free. 1-8, let's get it. I'm reaching out to the poor people this week and alone. I'm reaching out to the fortunate who can build them homes.
I'm reaching out to the one who seems to have lost their way. And I'm calling on all the ones who can show them a brighter day.
I believe if you believe that we can achieve anything.
So lift your voice and give it the verity.
Now let your heart see.
Africa to America. Everywhere the Lord spread some love. Our faith and a little hope. I believe that we can heal the blow. It's time to open our eyes and see that all we need is you and me. Unity is like harmony. So let me see you stretch your hands across the world. Hands across the world. Hands across the world. Stretch your hands across the world. Hands across the world. Hands across the world. Let me see you stretch your hands across the world.
I'm reaching out to all of the hoods on the streets everywhere. I'm reaching out to all the leaders, show the will that you care. Can't go no more, you've given up and your energy's running low. I'm reaching out to the pastors, say a word and give us more.
I believe if you believe that we can achieve.
Good evening, Kumba. As always, welcome to our next episode to the Human Rights Hour with the GCI Global Conscience Initiative. As always, at Lakeside Radio, the best in the Southwest. I'm your presenter, Sohail, from Italy. You know me now. With me, there is my patron, Mr. Ebenezer, and my colleagues. I will let them introduce themselves.
Yes, I'm Tebo Ebenezer. I will also be a participant to the show this evening.
Hi, I'm Sophie. I guess you know me from now on, from Switzerland. I'm still happy to be with you tonight.
Hello, my name's Ian, and I'm from the US. Happy to be with you guys tonight.
So the topic for today is going to be a little different from the usual. Usually we focus on one topic about human rights. Today we want to give you a general overview about the human rights and specifically about the history of this important document that is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So stay tuned, listeners, and see you in a while.
Believe that we can achieve anything. So lift your voice and give it everything. Now let your heart sing.
So, as always, human rights for the Human Rights Hour. Human rights is our main concern as an association, Global Conscience. You can find us opposite to the High Court. Later I will give the coordinates to reach us as always. So let's first give us maybe a little introduction of what human rights are in general. If you are loyal listeners to us, maybe you already know, but it's always good to refresh the notion. So when we say human rights, rights are usually some inalienable conditions that are stated in each constitution. Human rights has this word human in front of it because we strongly believe that as an individual, as a human being, you possess them from the moment of birth. But this concept is quite, how can I say, quite new, quite also difficult to translate him into the various culture of the world. So, for example, is really interesting, that's why we choose the topic right now, to go through the history and how this very, very important document that we call the Universal Declaration of Human Rights came to be. What are the historical conditions that moved this document? Before starting, maybe, Sophie, you want to add something about this issue?
Well, maybe just give a few examples to make sure everybody knows what human rights are. So we can find as a human right the right to education, the right of freedom expression, the right to own a property, what else? The right freedom of movement is a human right as well. We went to do some sensitization in the school last week, and the one that was coming out very often was the right to education and the right to own a property from the kids. That was really interesting.
Maybe later also you can tell us something more about this new project that Global Conscience is putting forward, because I think it's very important to sensitize the youth about this issue. But again, all these rights that Sofia talked about, again, the important part of this word is human. So without distinction of gender, race, age, or any mental capability, like any form of discrimination that can be put forth, the word human eliminates them completely, because it states that you possess them as a human being. So, Mr. Ebenezer, you want to add something? Maybe give us some challenges on running an NGO, human rights NGO in Cameroon.
No, maybe before I even come in, I'm sure we must have prepared some few intellectual explanations to our listeners out there about human rights. But we want to say that is human rights has actually been a very sensitive, I would say, area in not only in Kumba, not only in the southwest region, but the entire Cameroon as a whole.
Of course.
Maybe I have not been to some other part of the world, but I believe from what we have been reading, we know it's a global challenge for every country to be able to meet up with the expectations of each government in its attempt maybe to respect the rule of law and maybe the rights of each and every individual or citizens. And as you said, there are new areas, like we even talk about the rights of the minorities, which are some of the new forms of rights that are coming up. There are so many of them, and it's actually a great challenge to a society that has not even, first of all, even accepted to fully implement even the first human rights. These rights that we just acquire immediately we are born.
As human beings. Also,
as human beings.
Is, as Mr. Ebenezer say, is a constant struggle. And also for every country, because almost all the recognized countries in the United Nations accept the Universal Declaration nominally in their constitution. But implementing, as Mr. Ebenezer was saying, implementing these rights
is the biggest challenge.
Is totally another issue for every country, also in Europe.
Yes.
We have major human rights violation also in Switzerland. Maybe Sophie can testify that is the country, as we will see shortly, where these rights were ratified. That is also, they have some minor issues about that. Maybe prisoners' rights, if you remember, we were talking about that 1 week ago. So let's not waste any more time. Let's go deep into this historical experience. So as we all know, maybe know, like human rights, the Universal Declaration in particular, is being developed in response to the atrocity committed during the World War II. All over the world. It was world war. So it's not just a European war, right? So maybe Ian, our friend from the United States, can elucidate more about some historical passage about this period.
Yeah, so a little bit of background on what caused the United Nations and what caused eventually the Universal Declaration on Human Rights was obviously, as you said, World War II. It was a global war. Asia, Europe, the Americas were involved. Africa as well. During the war, the atrocities committed by countries like Germany and Japan, the killing of millions of Jewish people across Europe, the takeover of a lot of China, all of these places caused millions of unnecessary deaths.
Massacres, yes.
Mm-hmm. Massacres. So out of the war came a call for peace, a call for an end to violence, an end to endless violence, basically. So the United Nations was created, and in 1945 started working. They started getting delegates from different countries. And since its creation, the United Nations Human Rights Commission was established.
They basically was created, if I'm wrong, they were created to have an international table to discuss issues before escalating to violence. Mm-hmm. And also to safeguard what you have said about human dignity, mm-hmm. for the first of all. So if you have a round table with all the nations, maybe issues can be resolved before they escalated to violence. That was the primary reason, right?
Correct. Yeah, to sit face to face and deal with the issues that were at hand instead of letting them escalate into another eventual war of the same scale or the same loss of human life. So, but the UN Declaration of Human Rights was finally constructed and signed in 1948. It was a large effort across the UN and the UN Human Rights Commission, which was chaired by Eleanor Roosevelt at the time of its signing. She had a lot to do with the drafting of it, along with many other individuals from around the world and different intellectuals from all different walks of life. But the eventual signing of it in 1948 in December until now, it still stands as the most inclusive Declaration of Human Rights, the most inclusive document that is recognized by the most countries in the world as being a standard of human life and human dignity.
That's true. And also to all the women listening at home, one of the key figures, and we will go maybe briefly to her, why is she so important, is Eleanor Roosevelt. She was a woman. So this should give a lot of strength to all our female listeners at home. So Ian, you want to add something? Or?
No, other than that, that's
Okay.
basically the short history of it.
That's really good, actually. So what we are saying basically was the stem from witnessing human atrocities and to not let this human dignity fall to the ground anymore. So, but also...
Maybe so here before we continue, I want to ask whether
Of course.
before the 1948, truly or before the wars, was there nothing existing like human rights?
Maybe Sophie can take a little answer to that. That is actually an interesting question because human dignity is not a concept that was born in 1948. So
Yeah, exactly. It has actually started way earlier than 1948. We can see already with the first king of the ancient Persia, Cyrus the Great, that there was this idea of freedom and equality that was born. So it starts a very, very long time ago. And then a lot of different treaties contributed to the creation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. To name a few of them, you have the Magna Carta in 1215, where you have this idea of having the right to own and inherit a property and to be protected from excessive taxes.
and also to be represented.
So since 1215, the year 1215,
Some of
Yes.
these ideas were already in place as
Already
long
existing.
as 1215.
Yeah, exactly. Before that, we had this idea of natural law. So before having actually a constitution that were protected rights of citizens, you have this idea that people will follow certain unwritten laws. So nothing was written, but you just follow this natural law. And then from that, some different treaties will be signed that will contribute to the Declaration of Human Rights.
What also really important, I think, is that all these things, as Sophia say, let's state that again, were not written in a unified form. They were just like ideas that when the thinkers and philosophers around the centuries contribute to create. And finally, in 1948, it was the final, we can say
final
that.
drafts.
Yeah, and there were
Sophia?
actually a lot of different steps. The United States Declaration of Independence is one of the steps that needs to be considered. It was in 1776, where you have the two main themes that were individual rights and the right of revolution. And this will influence a lot the French Revolution in 1789, where you have this idea we're getting closer each time. So this time is the right of liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. And we have finally the idea that law is the expression of the general will, which means that everybody is protected beyond the law.
That is actually quite an interesting point, how these concepts, these ideals, were like taking shapes during the centuries. It's really like a powerful idea that you are giving us, like the idea that all the pieces were getting in place from, and also, as you say, we are talking about revolutions. We're talking about blood of people spilled on the ground to reach for these rights. So that's why also they are very, very important. You want to...
Yeah, exactly. It's really important to consider the whole history before the Second World War, because it really has an impact in the whole construction of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And you can see that these ideas were not born like that. It's something that took centuries to actually being elaborated properly.
Yeah, this is actually another form of the constant struggle that we were talking about before. because it was from the beginning. You talk about Cyrus the Great, we're talking like before Christ. You're talking about a really long history of all these pieces going into place. And that's why probably the importance of some characters like Eleanor Roosevelt and other like great figures of this period, because their task was to take all these pieces and put them together and also in a universal way. Because usually those rights were considered sometimes, like for example those of Cyrus the Great, the great king of Persia, were the laws of the people that inhabit the Persian Empire. They were not universal. They were not universal for all human beings. So this is actually the great step that a lot of notable characters have struggled over the centuries to do that. Maybe, Ian, you want to go through some of the most notable characters of...
Yeah, just mention a few names most people probably already know. We already mentioned Eleanor Roosevelt, who was the First Lady of the United States. Her husband was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who during her time as First Lady in the U.S. was a champion for the poor, a champion for women's rights. During the Great Depression in the United States, she went all over the country working for the poor and trying to help change the situation. And then during and after World War II was also a champion for the Allied front and for obviously human rights when she was finished. Some other people, obviously Nelson Mandela and the struggles in South Africa against the apartheid.
I think there was, I think Friday was celebrated as his day. Either Friday or such Friday or Thursday, like that. I don't know. One of these days has been put aside by the United Nations to celebrate as Mandela's Day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That is very important, actually, for all, not only for Africans, actually, but for people all around the world.
Yeah. Other figures like Aung San Suu Kyi from Burma or Myanmar, however you choose to say it. She struggled for the rights of her people and was under house arrest for countless years, separated from her family, separated from everything.
And she's still fighting for the rights.
She is still fighting. She's won the Nobel Prize for the Peace Prize. She's a notable author and still goes around the world speaking on behalf of people around the world who are having their rights violated. Other people like Mahatma Gandhi in India who fought for rights of people, and obviously the Dalai Lama, who's another notable figure right now.
Also, maybe I really want to read a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King, of course, who was also a champion of equal rights for the people. Is just...
I'm sure he's very, very popular when you talk about fighting for the rights of people.
That's true. So the quote that I really like for me, is like a motto of like, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. This is beautiful now. And actually, this is exactly what we are talking about, because if you remember, listeners, the last Monday, we talked about prisoners' rights. And if you remember, we say that if you consider the rights, how the lowest person in a society is treated, that is a good standard to know how the rights in your country are respected. So if you are able to respect the right of the person that you consider the lowest or the most poor or disenfranchised, that is a good way of measuring how all the rights of everybody. So as Dr. King says, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Really, really beautiful and powerful word. Maybe, Sophie, you want to add something to this discussion?
I think it's just, I don't know. I think there's nothing to add. It's just perfect summary of what needs to be said.
Ian?
Yeah, I think my final word on notable figures in human rights history is that there are these big figures, these big names who have made a big impact, but also you have to consider all of the countless people that every day are fighting for human rights, in not even NGOs, just individuals across the world who every day are taking part to...
We can call them the silent fighters.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also want to ask, why these great fighters were fighting for the rights of people? Did these people had in mind a country like Cameroon
of course,
to also promote the protection of the dignity of man like Cameroon? Do they have Cameroon in mind?
Maybe, I think that they have like all human beings in mind, but the issue is that since these people have become really famous because they came across really big challenges in their country. And that's why I think they focused primarily on what was happening like Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King, because we're talking about extraordinary people because they met extraordinary challenges in extraordinary times. But that's why probably Ian was talking about, like, there are countless of people, like human rights are written with the sweat and the blood of, first of all, the people whom right are not respected. Those are the first martyrs on the struggle for human rights.
Yes.
And then you have people like volunteers and nationals that create NGO to help their people. Those are the new extraordinary people of tomorrow. But these people actually met extraordinary challenges in their own country. That's where they become famous, because most of them died from violent death. Most of them have met extraordinary challenges in their own country. So maybe we can move on. Maybe Sophie, you want to add something about your experience as a human rights volunteer, and maybe you have found some challenges in, like, applying human rights to traditional cultures and tradition in general more than culture, like.
Yes, of course. Other struggles that might happen while you fight for human rights is this a clash that might happen between the tradition that exists in every country and the different human rights that are stated in this Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So when you have tradition in a country, you have customs and beliefs, and it's settled since such a long time that when you move a little bit, you add some external factors within that country, it might create some struggles and problems with a tradition that already exists.
By factors, maybe you mean also economical and changes in the surroundings and neighbor countries.
Yeah, it could be any type of changes. So yeah, economic and environmental, immigrants coming. A lot of different factors. So yeah, you can have a clash between tradition and human rights. And this creates a huge problem because you have this cultural tradition that you don't want to change, and it's people living in that country that own this culture, and it shouldn't be removed. But other than that, you would like to integrate new principles and new human rights that might not actually fit with the tradition existing in that country.
If we want to give an example, and also this is something that was important also in my country when at the time of my mother and grandmother. Article 16 of the Universal Declaration, Chapter 2, states that marriage should be entered into only with the free and full consent of the intending spouses. So that is, for example, something that is culturally very difficult to integrate.
Yeah. Because
also, like, both the bride and the groom are raised in traditional cultures. Mm-hmm. So that's why nobody can impose this process, but it have to born from the roots up.
Yeah, this is the problem, because in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, you're supposed to protect the culture and the tradition that already exists in the country. But by implementing human rights, you might need to remove a little bit some traditions. So while you're doing and trying to make sure that human rights are protected, you might have two different schools of thought. Either some people might think, yeah, they want to implement human rights, they're doing their cultural imperialism, they want to change everything, and they don't want to respect our traditions.
Some teachers in the school says they have come to put stubbornness on the head of their children.
Yeah, exactly.
That is a good example, actually, of this type of thought.
Some will say, the men will say they want to put stubbornness in their women.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. Or you can have another way of thinking, which is by protecting the human rights of everybody, then you will make sure that everybody has the minimum of human dignity that is protected, and from that, any tradition could be protected. So this is something that could be discussed for hours, but that's more or less the two type of thought that you can find while discussing human rights.
It will also not be strange for you to also, or for our listeners out there to also know that even some of our administrators are against human rights, who are supposed to be one of the promoters of human rights.
Or implementers.
Yeah, they stand as a hindrance, as a blockade for the implementation of the rule of law of human rights.
Maybe Ian want to add something?
Yeah, if that's a similar topic that Ebenezer, the government standing in the way of human rights. So we talked about how the U.S. Declaration Independence from England was a key point in human rights history. In the Declaration, it says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their creators with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness."
All men are created equal.
All men are created equal, which was written in 1776. But the atrocities of slavery in the United States lasted for almost another 100 years afterwards. So a lot of people stood in the way of change. A lot of people stood in the way of granting these inalienable rights to all men. So it's just another key example of how it takes change and acceptance, and that is hard. Now, I mean, Article 4 of the Declaration, Universal Declaration of Human Rights recognizes a person's right not to be kept in slavery or servitude. So it is something that is accepted, but as you guys have all mentioned, it's hard.
It's a struggle, always between recognition and implementation.
Yeah, it is, as you said, it's a struggle, and it is not bread and butter, it's not just biscuit. Yeah, but I think we will also expect our listeners out there to also understand that each and every one of them has a contribution, has a role to contribute to the realization of this awareness or this implementation of or protecting the dignity of man. Everybody, not only the organization, not only the government, but each and every citizen has that responsibility.
And also, listeners, if you don't ask for your right, those rights usually will not be given to you for free. You have to ask them and know them, first of all. That's why we say knowledge is power, right? Yeah. So if you don't ask them and if you don't know them, it's really difficult that people in power will willingly accept to give power away from them.
I know when you don't really know them, at times you are even confused and you go and fall into big trouble in the name of standing by your right. You see, and many of us forget to even understand that rights go alongside with obligations.
Of course.
And we just hang on our rights and at times forget about our obligations, which is very dangerous.
That's true. For example, one time you can ask for your right to be represented in front of a law and to have a fair trial, and 1 week later you stand in the market and you upload jungle justice, maybe. Or you don't call the police and you take matter on your own hand. That is what we say about rights and obligation that have to go hands in hands. And also knowledge, first of all. Knowledge of those rights is important.
So, every day I travel along the road to Douala, and you see there is this contestation every day in the vehicle. Am I supposed to hold my identity card, or am I supposed to? Why is the police harassing me? And so on.
If you remember, it happened the first time that I traveled from Douala to Kumba with you, mister. I remember that. We were stopped for 40 minutes also.
So we should know our rights and our obligation, what we are obliged to do. We should not seize that for a right.
Listeners, we have come to the end of our discussion. Of course, we will have another opportunity to be together next week. As always, if you have inquiries, like, for example, you remember that we did a very successful program on the rights and obligation in front of law enforcement. Maybe soon we can retake that.
Yeah, but Mr. Sohel, before you maybe call off this program, maybe our listeners out there, we want to know what you as an NGO of Global Conscience is doing for the sensitization of this public to know about their rights. What are you people really doing?
There is also something that I was saying before leaving the show. We usually, except for of course, this very program that we are taking every week, we have 3 different programs now. The one that Sofia has already mentioned briefly on the sensitization in schools.
That one, maybe these holiday periods where the youths are maybe doing holiday classes, you go there and do sensitization.
Sensitization on human rights. That is a temporary for holiday period.
Okay.
Our 2 main goals are, first of all, the CAM project, Community Arbitration and Mediation, when we try to work with the traditional council in the Mogue subdivision to implement human rights and to spread the culture of human rights, even to traditional councils, because we believe that peace building in a community comes from the traditional council, and the respect of the human dignity and human rights.
Yeah.
So these two powerful tools together, a traditional council that is very close to the community, and a traditional council that is knowledgeable of human rights, I think can be a very powerful tool to achieve peace and dignity into every community.
Okay.
Our second project is called the Prisoners' Right Intern, and basically we are getting this program started again after a period of pause, and basically we are offering legal assistance with our legal office to relatives of inmates that maybe have trouble. Of course, it's important to say that we don't charge money for all these services. That is really important, what give us the name non-governmental organization and non-profit
Which
organization.
means if there is any association or group of people or family meetings that need such sensitization, I think they should contact Global Conscience.
They should contact
You
Global
guys
Conscience.
will not charge them anything to come for sensitization.
That is also because we believe that if you start to ask money for the service, your voice is a little bit lower in respect. So, and also like we have a really steady program of, we can call it complaint recording. So if you have any issue and you feel like your rights as a human being are being threatened or not respected, you can join us at the office every day of the week from 9 to 4, opposite to High Court, or just call us our number at 70690837. I repeat, 70690837. Or you can also call Lakeside Radio at 33030372. 33030372. And your complaints, your voice will be heard by professionals in human rights and by this very esteemed NGO. Actually, now we have worked for the Traditional Council for how many years, Mr. Benizer?
We have been in the field for close to 5 years.
That's really like
more than 5 years.
More than 5 years is
close to a decade.
Yeah, that is really impressive actually, because like it's always going on with private initiative and the struggle of volunteers and interns. So I just want to say just some word to say goodbye to our listeners, and we go to the conclusion of the conversation.
Again, thank you for having us this evening. And again, if you have any other information you want to know, come to Global Conscience. We'd be glad to let you know anything you'd like to know about human rights or anything of the like.
Yeah, same here. Thank you very much. Hope it was interesting and not too full of information, but hopefully don't hesitate to contact us for any questions.
Maybe I would just say for me that our listeners out there should always stay tuned to this very wonderful program every Monday at 6:30. They will not. They will, if at all they don't tune into the program, they will miss a lot concerning human rights. I think we are there to provide them with this wonderful service that has a strong role to play in the development of our society.
Those are very good words, and I think they are the best words to conclude our program for today. So have a good night, Kumba, and we'll see you next week.
Well, stand up. Stretch out your hands. 1-8, represent the dream.
Feeling free. 1-8, let's get it. I'm reaching out to the poor people this week and alone. I'm reaching out to the fortunate who can build them homes. I'm reaching out to the one who seems to have lost their way. And I'm calling on all the ones who can show them a brighter day.